Black Myth Wukong has been one of the most hyped action RPGs in recent memory. The game always looked fast, fluid, and it looked pretty damn good. And now that I've decided to see what all the fuss was about for myself, I felt kind of underwhelmed. I've got to say, Black Myth Wukong is overrated, in my opinion. Let's talk about why, but before we do that, if you do end up enjoying the video despite me criticising a game you probably really enjoy, then please consider subscribing as we are trying to get to 2,000 subscribers by the end of the year. But enough of that nonsense. Like usual, whenever it's time for a negative video, we're going to start with the positives. If there's one part of Black Myth Wukong that I have zero qualms with, it's the world design and the lore. From the first hour, it is obvious that this game is doing something visually and culturally rich. The introduction with the boss fight, I thought that was really cool. The spectacle was amazing. Spectacle is something this game pretty much always gets right, but it doesn't feel as though you're walking through a random fantasy setting with just random Asian-inspired aesthetics. The world feels like it was born out of the mythology it's based on. You've got mist-drenched mountains, temples overtaken by nature, creatures that feel like ancient spirits more than just mobs, and it does flow with a sense of cosmic balance and decay, like the world is remembering itself through you. It's based, of course, on Journey to the West, which is one of the most enduring and dense pieces of mythological fiction ever written. But the game doesn't spoon-feed you familiar Sun Wukong moments like a theme park adaptation. Instead, it leans into the stranger, darker, more obscure parts of the mythos. You run into characters and beasts that have layers to them, not just boss health bars. They're weird, morally murky, sometimes just plain sad. There's a real melancholy in some of the side stories that did actually catch me off guard. Even the environmental storytelling is actually quite strong. You'll walk into an area and you will immediately feel like something terrible has happened, and then sure enough the lore or a side quest or something like that will quietly confirm it. It's subtle, sometimes vague, but I do think that aspect works. That said, I wish the game had better tools for surfacing that depth. You kind of have to want to find it all. It's rarely pushed to the front, but for those that care about world building and cultural storytelling, it is rewarding in a pretty solid way. So the world and the lore, genuinely great. Now for the combat, and combat in Black Myth Wukong is what I would call technically competent but emotionally inconsistent. On the surface it does look smooth, responsive, weighty, all those buzzwords, and it pretty much is. And for the first few hours, the game feels really good. I was really enjoying the first few levels of this game. You've got your flashy staff combos, you've got the ability to switch stances, you could dodge, there is a parry system if you want to jump through a bunch of hoops to use it, and a bunch of transformations to really keep things fresh and keep you feeling somewhat powerful against dastardly foes. But the deeper you get, the more I felt the cracks started to show. We're going to start with the stance mechanic, which is supposed to be one of the core combat features. You get 3 stances, smash, pillar and thrust, each with different speed, range and combo potential. Sounds great on paper and pretty par for the course for the genre. Sometimes it actually does work, but most of the time it doesn't feel like you're making tactical decisions based on enemy behaviour. It really felt like you're just choosing the one you like the most. Instead of flowing between stances as a form of expression or counterplay, the same way that Sekiro's posture mechanic or Nioh's stance system feel, here it just adds a layer of extra mental friction. You're already juggling transformation cooldowns, spirit energy, heavy attack timings, and now you also have to guess whether a certain enemy happens to be vulnerable to a few stabs or slow swings. Worse still is the way that the game handles enemy balance. Most enemies are manageable, mostly even enjoyable, but every now and then you will run into one that throws the entire combat system out of whack. Enemies that may ignore hit stun, enemies that will spam tracking attacks so that your dodge simply doesn't work, or that can break your flow with really awkward movement patterns. Of course this is to challenge the player, but a lot of the times it doesn't feel like the good kind of difficulty, where you feel as though you've learned something when you die. It's the kind of difficulty where you feel like the game just changed the rules, or at least designed the encounter without thinking about how the combat itself actually works. And what then happens is it doesn't feel like a test of skill, it feels as though you are fighting the design itself. You would expect a game with fast-paced combat to evolve naturally, to let you learn new moves as you go, master them and incorporate them into your own rhythm and arsenal. But here every new ability just felt locked behind a slow, clunky, confusing interface that then made progress feel pretty more tedious than rewarding really. And here's another issue that really started to grate on me the longer I played: the dodging emphasis. Yes, dodging works. Yes, technically, dodging feels good. That's fine. But it becomes painfully obvious really early on that this game wants you to dodge and it does not want you to parry at all. Parrying exists, yes, but it's either really poorly telegraphed unreliable, or just not powerful enough to be worth the risk and the effort you have to do to get it. So instead of a dynamic back and forth where you're trading blows, reading animations, and committing to close quarters timing, you're just rolling around, circling the boss, waiting for a safe window to poke them a couple times, over and over. And I want to make it clear that this specifically is a personal preference. I have always gravitated more towards parry builds in third-person games when possible. Sekiro is my favourite Souls-like Born Ring game, whatever you want to call them. I love Sekiro. I've always been much more comfortable with parries, so having to jump through hoops to do it was incredibly tedious, and I didn't feel it was worth it when I had it. I don't find dodging 24/7 particularly engaging. I prefer when aggression is the focus, and Black Myth Wukong doesn't reward aggression, timing, or risk-taking in the same way. It rewards patience, pattern recognition, and playing it safe. Which, if that's something you love, then good for you. This point is completely irrelevant, but for me, it felt a bit too passive. Combat becomes a weird paradox where you have all these options and all this flair, all this power at your fingertips, but the optimal way to play often ends up just feeling slow, repetitive, and sometimes boring. And again, it's not bad across the board. The dodging is good. It is a well-implemented dodge, and you can have fun with it. And I often did, especially when the game behaves and lets its systems breathe. But all too often, it stumbles over its own ambitions, trying to be deep and punishing, but instead becomes rigid and frustrating. But what about the main event of any Souls like the bosses? There are moments in this game where you step into an arena, the music kicks in, and you just know you're about to do something pretty special. The camera pulls back, the boss delivers a cryptic monologue or lets out a scream, and for the next few minutes, it's you versus them. No distractions, no fluff, just pure tension. And when it works, it really works. There are bosses here that hit that perfect sweet spot of difficulty where you die, of course, but not because the game cheated or spammed cheap attacks. You died because you hesitated, you misread a combo, you got greedy, you dodged too early. You walk away thinking, alright, that one's on me, I will do this next time. And that feeling, the adrenaline rush where you sprint back to the boss because you're actually excited to try again, is peak game design, and that's the kind of difficulty that pushes you to be better in a motivating way. And a lot of the time this game does do that, but a lot of the time it also doesn't, because just as often as Black Myth Wukong nails a boss fight, it'll completely fumble the next one. There are far too many fights that start strong but then completely overstay their welcome. You learn the mechanics, you understand the patterns, you play smart, and then the fight just keeps going for way too long, and suddenly it doesn't feel like a test of skill anymore. It feels like a test of stamina, like the game is asking how long can you dodge the same 3 attacks before your brain just gives out. There's a certain kind of frustration that comes from almost beating a boss and dying, not because you made a mistake per se, but because your patience ran out. You're dodging perfectly, you're landing your hits, you're keeping your spacing, and then you zone out for half a second because you've been in this fight for 8 minutes already, and one slip up and it's gone and you're dead. And yes, sure, I can already hear you saying, maybe that is a skill issue. Maybe if I just got good, I wouldn't have died to the same boss 11 times in a row. Maybe. But if I've memorised every single attack animation, timed every single dodge window, and still die because the boss has a health bar longer than the Great Wall of China, maybe that's a design issue as well. And when you stack that up with the combat issues I mentioned earlier, the emphasis on dodging, the unreliable stance utility, the sluggish ability system, it all adds up eventually. Some fights feel like controlled chaos, others feel like they were designed by someone who just wanted to see how long you could go before you gave up. But again, not all fights are like this. A lot of the boss fights are actually really, really good. They're visually striking, mechanically engaging, and thematically satisfying. I did beat some bosses and then think that's one of the best fights I've had in an action game recently. And then 10 minutes later you let a boss that makes you want to shut the game off mid-attempt because it feels like they just, I don't know, wanted to ruin your day. So here's the thing. Black Myth Wukong isn't a bad game. Not even close. It's ambitious, it's bold, it looks incredible, and there is definitely a certain type of player who likes this game type, this genre, a lot more than I do. And for them, they will probably think this game is absolutely amazing. But the reality is that for me, it just does not live up to the hype. And more importantly, it doesn't live up to the praise that it's been getting. The fact that this was actually nominated for Game of the Year is crazy to me. I can think of so many games that were leagues better than this last year. Off the top of my head, there's obviously Astrobot, Balatro is better than this, Metaphor is better than this. Nine Souls was definitely better than this. Rebirth was better than this. Infinite Wealth was better than this. Silent Hill 2 was better than this. Stellar Blade was better than this, and there are many, many more, but these were the obvious ones that jumped out to me right now. I get that it's flashy, I get that it was groundbreaking in China, and yeah, the world building is pretty cool, but once you get past the aesthetic, I felt as though I was left with a game that is less fun to play than it is to look at. It feels like the kind of game where a lot of people just wanted it to be great so badly that it kind of blinded them a little bit. Look, this game is fine. Not every game needs to be genre-defining. Black Myth Wukong has some real moments of brilliance. The kind of moments where you think, if they just tighten this up, if they refine these ideas, then their next game could be something incredible. But this one, in my opinion, not a chance. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. I hope that you did enjoy. Remember, we are trying to get to 2,000 subscribers, so if you did enjoy the video, then please consider subscribing. Also, make sure to leave a like, as it really does help. I upload at least one video a week, but for now, that is all. Have a nice day, and goodbye.